Then I want to be able to get into some general considerations when keeping this in mind, and for how it may be a benefit or another consideration for family members, and then talk about some resources that are readily available. I will ask if there's questions that come about throughout the course of the training, if we could please reserve the questions until the very end. If you want to make sure that you don't forget it, please do just dump the question into the chat. I am going to make sure to save some time towards the end of the presentation to answer any questions. But for me, for pacing purposes, I just need to steamroll through the information. I would also say, keep the chat up and ready. There's going to be a couple of times where I'm going to put some prompt questions out there, and so feel free to respond and share some of your thoughts. Okay. So we'll actually start with one of those prompt questions now when trying to conceptualize the background on the problem, some of the issues that our loved ones, our family members, may be presenting with when they're calling in to us, the helpers. What are the concerns that they are usually presenting with? Any particular things that come up in regards to concerns for themselves, concerned of concerns for their loved one who is impacted by the gambling issues. Okay, Kevin, of course. Money issues, financial concerns. This can present in many different directions. Maybe it's seeing their loved one's financial viability kind of deteriorate. And sometimes the loved ones themselves have been directly financially impacted, whether it's through loaning or bailing out their loved one with the gambling problem, or in sometimes, unfortunately, people find out that their credit has been used by their loved one. Trust. So deteriorating relationships, absolutely. Thank you so much, Pamela. That's a big one that comes up when we have family members that are calling in. Mental health concerns, both ways again, correct? Right? So for the loved one with the gambling concern, often difficulty with anxiety, sometimes with depression. A big concern here is risk for suicide, extremely heightened over any other group, but then also for the loved one themselves. Lots of lost sleep, lots of biting the nails. Are they going to be okay? Are we going to be okay? Especially for those families who've been significantly impacted by finances. The deception, right? So there's a layer of betrayal trauma that can sometimes come up. Betrayal trauma is a word that we use quite a bit when I'm doing work with those impacted by compulsive sexual behavior. And that's I was first introduced to that term when going through that training. But I see betrayal trauma coming up in many, many, many different ways. And so, thank you, Francis, for that example right there. Like I did not know this for so long. Do I even know the person that I'm married to, the person that I'm living with, et cetera, et cetera. Job loss. Thank you so much, Lorraine. There's lots of things that can be connected to job loss, but a more direct correlate with financial viability. So many, many concerns that our family members can sometimes present with when they are calling in. Patricia, concerns regarding enabling, so people reflecting on their own behaviors. Am I part of the problem? Is this something that I am causing? What can I do to control it? So on and so forth. I'm using those words intentionally, especially for those who are familiar with 12-step meetings. But so when kind of like reflecting on the literature, potential harms, if we kind of like put them into four different categories, potential harms that family members are most concerned with, financial harms, relationship harms, physical, emotional health, and then social and employment. And there's, of course, you can read within each category, but these are just like general areas. So there's lots of impacts or potential impacts by gambling harms. And so the loved ones that are calling in with concerns, they may personally be impacted already by a number of these, and then with potential concern or the looming threat for other ones. So If they're calling us, potentially this is the first time that they're interfacing with the help system. Perhaps they've been through some other forms of help in the past. But so generally speaking, if a person has had exposure to other forms of help before, they may have already been exposed to family support groups, right? Now, there's a variety of different family support groups. I know different community organizations may host their own specific family support groups. These might be more leaned primarily to families impacted by substance use disorders, or more primarily for those that are impacted by chronic pervasive mental health conditions. So, in regards to community-based family supports specific towards gambling, they can be somewhat limited unless you're looking towards Gam-Anon, right? I also put in smart friends and family in here. I sometimes think this is a an under-referenced resource. I always like to throw that up for a variety of different reasons. One that I can get to in a moment. But so when we take a look at these two resources, there's accessibility here, right? So there's free community resources. It's about a time commitment, and then potentially a consideration of if a person wants to be able to find a meeting in person or a meeting virtually, whether it's concerns for their own privacy, or just generally speaking with for ease of access. So with access to family support groups, and more specifically taking a look at the ones that are highlighted here, these are group-based interventions, right? So the two that are listed here, and of course the majority of the ones offered by community-based organizations, they're going to be group-based. They're focusing on the CSO's recovery. So a CSO, for those unaware, stands for Concerned Significant Other, right? So it's going to be focused on them themselves, not necessarily so much focusing on their loved one who has problematic gambling. The focus is going to be to provide support and coping. And then there can be an emphasis of some of these meetings, and I'm thinking more specifically towards Gam-Anon, emphasizing on detaching with love. Right. Now, I remember when I first started in the field a little over 20 years ago, there was a community-based family support program. It was not Gam-Anon, it was not Al-Anon, it was just a community-based program. And they had a little bit more of like a tough love type of approach. And so the strong emphasis on detachment. And so like earlier in my career, I was hearing that a lot when kind of like working with family members, or, to use the word quote unquote, the codependence. Right. So you have to detach, you have to detach. It was only later that I was really hearing a little bit more of the emphasis on detaching with love, kind of like referencing these are people that you love, right? Like it's not going to be very, very easy to kind of like close all doors there. But so it's, how do we kind of remove ourselves from the problem, from the addiction, and still love the person, right? So that's where the emphasis is going to be. The outcomes are measured primarily on improved family coping, right? So, how is the loved one doing? That's how we're measuring the outcome here. That's the focus of what these groups are supposed to be. Now, empirically, when it comes to taking a look at research, and I'm a data nerd, so I read up on this stuff as best I can, and sometimes having the opportunity to do a presentation like this, and I focus in on a specific topic, it gets the bug in my head to do a little bit more research in that particular area. So yes, and kind of like combing through the evidence base. There's actually limited evidence base when it comes to family support programs. Now, keep in mind a lot of the evidence base that does exist when talking about addiction support groups that are geared towards family members. These are focused on substance use disorders. There is not a very strong evidence base whatsoever when it comes to focusing on families that are impacted by gambling harm. there's actually a deficit in research there. So, professionals in the community, there's lots of opportunity here. Perhaps this call could be going towards other more larger spanned organizations, but that's clear that's in there. So okay, so we have these family support organizations. Some of them are local community based, and some of them are traditional fellowship groups, right? Such as Gam-Anon, and then Smart Friends and Family. Aside from that, other resources that families have available to them may be interventions. I say may intentionally because there's a financial toll that comes with interventions. Now, I know some of this stuff, and later on in the presentation, some of the stuff that's identified or used as descriptors for interventions, it's not the most friendly. However, I do believe there is a place for it. I have a number of colleagues that are professional interventionists. This is what they do. So yes, I do know absolutely there can be a sizable cost to this, and yet there is a place for interventions when it comes to the gamut of care access for our clients and for our families who are concerned for the identified patient. So, the interventions are described in literature as facilitated confrontation of a family member, at times by surprise. Now, for anyone that's familiar with the discipline of intervention, there's many, many, many different models of intervention. One of the ones that I'm more familiar with personally is something called the invitational intervention. So it kind of like takes the surprise part out of it. However, in the professional literature that's out there, over and over and over again, you're going to see Johnson model interventions referenced. Johnson model is typically not invitational. It can be a little bit more confrontational, a little bit more adversarial. And so, if we're gonna be data nerds just for the hour, like, okay, let's go with the literature, but then, possibly for other folks that really value the discipline of intervention, there's lots of opportunity for more literature to be created on the different models of intervention and potentially comparisons there. But this is what I'm working with because this is the only thing that's by and large out there. All right. Interventions can be costly, can be confrontational. One of the things that I saw over and over again, which I found interesting because I hadn't really considered before, is that with the rate of treatment entry that interventions do get, the two problem points that can come up there is so the person may find themselves getting to treatment. However, completing that treatment episode, that rate might be significantly lower, as well as the impact to the family relationships as a result of the intervention. Is that a favorite outcome there? So the person may get to treatment, but what's the quality of the family relationships thereafter? Those were some considerations that came up. Um, how are the outcomes measured? How do we know if it's a success? So the outcome in this case for intervention is measured by treatment entry. Does the person actually get to the destination of the treatment program, whichever place that is, whatever level of care that is? It doesn't matter. Do they get to a level of care, right? So immediately you're seeing a difference in how outcomes are being measured from family support groups to interventions. They're looking at completely different things, right? And then, unfortunately, for interventions, the evidence that is out there, it is a very poor evidence base, and that's just data driven. Now, these are the two things that are readily available out there. However, then comes along craft, which initially, prior to doing some of this research, I kind of like lumped into the family support program category. However, there's some noted differences from how craft functions as compared to how, for example, Gam-Anon or Al-Anon or Nar-Anon may function, or for how Smart Family and Friends function. Because again, just referencing the focus there, the primary goal and objective is supporting and helping the loved one cope. With craft, the focus is a little bit different. And so we're going to get into that. So again, CRAFT stands for Community Reinforcement and Family Training. CRAFT. Nice little acronym. It's funny when you try to do some searches on craft because you get all of these arts and craft groups, crocheting, lots of kids crafts, lots of senior crafts, etc. But you have to spell out community reinforcement and family training. So it makes a little bit of a clunky Google search, but you're able to find it, I promise. All right. What is craft? How did it come to be? If people are not already familiar with Robert Myers, I would suggest it. I actually had the ability to be trained by him back in like 2017. I did a 3-day intensive in Flatiron, so it was in Manhattan. Yeah, really, really great training, really, really intensive. And at the time, I was kind of like using that because I was putting together a family support group for a treatment organization that I was working with at that time. However, it's one of those things where it's like, all right, I want to dig up that manual. I have a couple of the primer books that came with it, and I know that there was a manual. And in the past couple of months that I was putting this together, I can't for the life of me find that manual because a lot of the resources and tools I'm going to be introducing, they're probably explicitly laid out in that training. That training was for individuals that wanted to be able to facilitate craft groups. So a majority of folks in that room were either A, professionals, or B, CSOs, concerned significant others, who, they were in their own personal recovery as a family member, and they were looking at starting up something within their local community. Hint, hint, we can start these type of things ourselves if we are appropriately trained to do them. Okay, so this model was developed in the late 80s, early 90s. It was specifically focused on treating family members that are impacted by alcohol and substance use disorders. I was actually unfamiliar with this ahead of time. So CRAFT is actually an expansion and offshoot off of CRA, community reinforcement approach, and this was used in the 70s. So some of the differences here is Craft integrates behavioral psychology, so rewards, reinforcers, consequences, social learning theory, right? So how we learn from each other, how we pick up behaviors, motivational interviewing techniques. So as a therapist, this is something I'm pretty equipped with. Of course, I could use a brush up every so often. And then family systems theory, right? So for people to attend craft groups, you do not need to be a professional. This is like a skills style training for individuals who want to help themselves and help their loved one. All right. Promising outcomes. Whoa, slide advance really quickly. Promising outcomes from randomized trials in the 1990s, and then shortly thereafter in late 90s throughout the early 2000s, craft was manualized and was introduced for clinical dissemination. So this is where we're seeing a lot of the repetitive literature that's come out. The training that I attended back in 2017, what are they doing? They're putting information out there. They're training the professionals who can then get it out to other people. So this is the path that craft took. Now to go back to the slide that I advanced to prematurely, what are the goals of craft, right? So, okay, so number one, we're looking to increase the likelihood that the identified patient enters treatment. Okay, this is the same primary measure, the primary outcome that we're looking at with Johnson model interventions, right? Is the person that we're concerned about getting to treatment, right? So that's one of the goals of craft. The second one, to reduce the occurrence of the targeted behavior, right? So even if the person does not enter into treatment, or even if they do enter into treatment, can we, through some of the behavioral training, rewards, reinforcements, consequences, etc. Can we reduce how often the person is engaging with the area of concern, right? So can we get them to treatment? Can we get them to reduce the targeted behavior? And then the third goal, improve the overall mental health and functioning of the concerned significant other. So this is a nice little bridge between the primary goal of intervention and the primary goal of family support groups. So we want to take care of that concerned significant other. And why are they seeking help in the first place? They're wanting their loved one to get to treatment, and perhaps the loved one might not be so ready to do so at this point in time. So, what is craft? Like, how do you actually do this stuff? So, craft is broken out into six different steps that we're going to expand on one by one. So, first is a functional analysis of substance use. This word substance use is intentional here because why was craft developed? To treat substance use disorders and alcohol use disorders, right? So let's take the inherent principles of it. All right. So a functional analysis, we want to understand play by play what's happening, right? So for the family members, and again, depending on the relationship they have with their identified patient or identified gambler, this might even be an open conversation back and forth between the two of them. Let's understand the elements of what's going on with their behavior, right? What are the antecedents? Are there certain people that it's usually happening with? Where are you when you're engaging in the behavior? What are you doing? Are there key emotions that are involved? Is it boredom? Like let's take a look. Let's inventory everything that's going on that's related to the concerning behavior. And then let's understand the consequences of that behavior, right? So we can look at the antecedents, we can look at what goes on with the behavior, what happens as a result, and then what's their response to that consequence. Are they like completely oblivious? Is it as though there's nothing wrong? Are they even recognizing it as a consequence? Are other people kind of like coming in and preventing them from feeling the full weight of the consequence? Is that something perhaps that I myself as a family member may be doing? Like, let's really take a look at everything that's going on surrounding the behavior. Afterwards, and this is where a lot of the behavioral techniques come in, we want to positively reinforce the preferred behavior, right? So this can look like many, many things. So it's integrating applied behavioral psychology, identifying positive behaviors to reinforce, right? What might that look like? So if a person is usually on the couch all Sunday long watching all three games, if they're only watching one game, do we want to be able to positively reinforce them engaging in some other behavior? Right. I'm thinking of a childlike example because I have a little child at home. So for us, positive reinforcers are going to Target and getting a Ninja Turtle toy, or like going out for ice cream when he does something that's really really great. And so it's like, okay, it doesn't have to be monetary in nature, but it's like, all right, what are the positive behaviors that we do want to reinforce? And then how do we go about doing that in a sustainable way? The sustainable reinforcer is going to be key here because we have to be able to do it consistently. This is just kind of like behaviorism 101, right? So if we're trying to reinforce a behavior, we have to reinforce it consistently. If we're inconsistent with our reinforcement, then the message, it's really not going to get through. We're not going to get the effect that we're looking for here. There's an emphasis on allowing for natural consequences, right? So sometimes one of the things that can come up when family members are attempting to intervene on a loved one's behavior that they're concerned with is if they are the one that is the imposer of the consequences, then the target gets placed on the loved one, not on the behavior, right? We're not looking at rupturing relationships. And sometimes family members, in a response to some inner turmoil for seeing their loved one going through some distress, family members can do whatever it is that they feel needs to be done in order to prevent the behavior or to try to control the person's future behavior. So again, if a loved one is identified as getting in the way or is causing more problems, then the person that has the problem with gambling or the problem with drinking, so on and so forth, they don't have to take a look at their behavior. They can focus their emotional energies on that loved one. Actually, you're the problem here, right? And nobody wants that. That's not going to be helpful. So, how do we allow for natural consequences? How do we keep the relationship open and safe for when that loved one is open to having a conversation, right? So, in addition to that, we want to avoid rescuing behaviors. We don't want to remove the experience of the consequence for the person that has the issue. Communication skills training, right? So, again, we want to keep that relationship open. We want to communicate in a clear way. We want to be able to, number one, identify what our own personal boundaries are, be able to communicate them in an open, clear, respectful way to our loved ones. We want to avoid conflict and improve the quality of our interactions. When we have a quality relationship with our loved one, the door is open so that if there is distress, if there are those moments when, like, hey, I actually think this might be a problem, we might be the person that they are open to talking to. If the quality of the relationship is poor, if the relationship, if more of the touch points or interactions are adversarial or negative in nature, I might not be the person that they open up to, right? So here's where the communication skills training comes um, in as a benefit for our loved ones. We want to make sure that they know that there's an open door. Treatment entry train. Oh, actually, you know what? There's a last point that I realized I didn't hit on the previous slide. Exploring when and how to communicate. And I find that I reference this quite frequently with families that I work with, and sometimes with clients too. When when taking a look at if we are in an interaction with someone and we're getting escalated, I do a little bit of nervous system education. So, okay, so if our sympathetic nervous system is activated, we're really going to be less able to respond to reason, and we're going to be more kind of like we're fired up, we're ready for the fight. There's an active threat that's going on. So if our loved one is in the middle of a crisis, now is not the time to talk about treatment, right? Now's not the time to say, so uh, what do you think your role in this is? Right? It's okay, is that the time, or can we work with supporting the individual? And of course, as a therapist, I'm thinking we want to help to regulate their nervous system a little bit when they're in crisis, so that once their nervous system is a little bit more in a regulated position, that's when we can get a little bit more leg room, a little bit more runway with some of the more critical or probing questions or giving some of that tough love in regards to holding up the mirror and really kind of exploring what's actually going on here. I love you. Is this helping? All right. Okay. Then getting ready for talking about treatment entry. And there's a couple of considerations in here. Usually when talking with family members, which I do quite a bit because I work quite a bit with teens and young adults, and I always say if you're going to do any of that work, you need to incorporate parents because it's you're only going to get a short ways with just a kid. And sometimes when we're really considering higher level of care, I have to say, you know what? Let's make a plan. I'm going to give you a couple of resources to check into. Call them, look at their website, so on and so forth. Make plan B, mentally put it in a shoebox, throw it in the back of the closet, and hope that we never need to use it. But the thing is, if the next crisis does happen, we want to know that you've already done the research, you're already comfortable, you have already said like, hey, this is what we're doing. We want to have that prepped and ready to go. Because if we're in crisis and we don't have the plan already set, we're going to scramble. And that's just going to heighten stress and anxiety for everybody, right? So let's identify different resources, have different options. Just as a practice owner myself, as well as our admin staff, I can't tell you the number of conversations that we've had with spouses, that we've had with parents of young adults, where there isn't a product from that conversation right then and there, but it's they're gathering information. This is who we are. This is what we do. No, you can't force them to come in. No, we're not going to do a surprise. You're not going to tell them that they're going to a doctor's appointment and surprise it's a therapy session. That's not right. We'll give some education behind that and so on and so forth. We'll give them some resources. If they're imagining their loved one might need a higher level of care, we'll give some referrals to organizations that we've had positive experiences with. Call these people, check them out. I never give just one. I always give several. I want to empower them with making their own decision for their loved one, etc. You'll identify what the plan is. So reviewing options, getting comfortable with it, and then contingency planning. Because one of the things sometimes that comes up is like like a waiting list. That's horrible. If anyone's had that experience before, where it's like, okay, we're good to go, everything's like notched up, and then all right, it's go time, and then it's like, and there's a waiting list, and then the motivation drops in that wait period. It's like, okay. So what's a contingency plan if plan A doesn't work out? And then, of course, we want to make sure that we're paying attention to self-care for the family members, prioritizing their own needs, regardless of the outcome, which can sometimes be common, right? So sometimes family members can be focused on the outcome and not necessarily the intervention. I go over that quite a bit. We want to focus on the intervention, not the outcome. Because can I rest my head on my bed, being able to say I did what I could to support my loved one? We want to evaluate the that loved one's access to peer supports. Who are they able to talk to? Because a lot of our folks experience some level of isolation, right? Who are they able to talk to? Are they plugged into other peer supports, whether it's Gam-Anon, whether it's another family support group, or are there other known loved ones who are in their life, who are in the know of what's going on, that they can talk to vent, to troubleshoot, just to make sure that they have their own heads screwed on straight, etc. Enhancing engagement and activities of interest. A lot of times, the concerns with the loved ones can become all-encompassing, and sometimes people feel like they lose themselves. If you have other children or other family members, it's okay to spend a couple hours to spend a day with them. If you haven't picked up the crochet set in a month, maybe it's okay to watch a movie and take care of yourself for an hour and a half, 2 hours, right? And then, of course, we want to be able to assess and then expand on stress management skills. How are they dealing with their own distress tolerance and emotion regulation in those times of crisis? So, generally speaking, craft, when it is distributed, it can typically be done in 12 sessions. 12 sessions, typically hour-long sessions. We'll talk about how it's disseminated, but that's typically how it's put out there. So there's different of those sessions that are focused on some of those different core steps. So program comparison. So if we take a look at all three, craft, peer supports, which in this the literature that I'm referencing specifically comes from 12-step based support. So Al-Anon, Nar-Anon. It's listed as Gam-Anon, but it's Al-Anon, Nar-Anon. And then interventions. So if we put it into the three groups, we want to compare the goals really, really quickly. So craft, as we already said, so we're looking at, is the person getting to treatment? Are we able to reduce the occurrence of the behavior? And then is the loved one feeling better? Right? Those are the three primary goals for craft. For Gam-Anon, or generally speaking, a 12-step family support programs, a primary goal objective to share experience, strength, and hope with those who are experiencing difficulties related to someone's gambling. And then is the CSO, are they getting help to cope with the stressors that are attached to their loved one's gambling? So this one is actually more specific towards gambling. Primary goal of intervention, confronting the identified patient, typically with a number of family members, with the goal of getting them to enter treatment. And this is typically done with use of rigid consequences and or ultimatums from family members. Sometimes those ultimatums can be centered on if you're not able to do this, I need to discontinue our relationship. Comparing methods. How are they going about doing this? So craft, it's using a blend of different strategies. So there's the behavioral strategies, social learning models, motivational strategies, and family systems. Craft can be administered individually, in groups, or through self-study. If you actually like go on to Google or Amazon or any other search like that, you can find a number of workbooks where a person can work through themselves, right? So Gam-Anon or 12-step family support programs, they tend to be spiritually centered programs, 12-step based, support group style. It is facilitated in groups. It is a peer facilitated group. Um, then, of course, for individuals that go a little bit of deeper into those fellowships, there is the ability to seek sponsorship. So there's the possibility of having individual support within the context of a group support format. And then interventions, we're really taking a look at behavioral contingencies, family system theory, and then a lot of interventionists, or at least the people that I'm familiar with and that I refer to if and when it's needed, is that there tends to be coaching packages that are built in pre-intervention and post-intervention. So family members get support on both ends. Evidence base for all three programs. And again, this was previously mentioned. So CRAFT actually shows strong empirical support for use in families where the identified patient has an identified substance use disorder. Again, I want to qualify here. A majority of the research that's out there regarding CRAFT is for individuals impacted by alcohol and substance use disorders. For Gam-Anon, empirical, or I'm sorry, for 12-step fellowships, primarily speaking, Al-Anon and Nar-Anon, empirical support for the intended goal is evident. But again, what's the intended goal? It's support for the loved one, right? It's not getting the identified client, the person with the problem into treatment. So there is support for the loved one, that this intervention is effective. And then intervention, in and of itself, it's limitedly empirical support. So there's lots of limitations there, unfortunately. Comparing outcomes. Now, this is actually going back to the 90s, when the first wave of research was going on, when the model was initially developed by Meyer and Williams. So Kraft had a now again, if we are adjusting the goal across the board for getting the loved one into treatment, Kraft has 60 to 67% success. 12-step family support intervention, 13 to 37% success, and interventions just shy of a third. Some very, very noted differences there, right? So if we're taking a look at the summary across the board, and just to talk about some strengths and limitations for each approach, for craft, there's strong support that craft helps to improve family well-being. Generally speaking, non-confrontational, works well with resistant individuals. Limitations for craft. It requires learning new skills. It's going to take time to onboard some of these skills. It takes the time as well as coaching. So sometimes, again, the 12 sessions that I said, which can be typical for organizations that administer craft, there has been a focus on integrating coaching in between or after a person has completed craft training. For 12-step family-based programs, the strengths widely accessible. Like this is a big, big, big note here. Lots of people can access 12-step family-based support groups, right? Strong peer support even outside of that group. People share cell phones. right? People are able to text and call and get ad hoc support as life goes on, as crisis kind of comes out, and if they need to check in with somebody. For those that open themselves up to putting their phone number out there and that are willing to call other people that maybe they've only seen face to face in a couple of meetings, those are willing to do it. That type of support is there. Helpful for emotional recovery of the family member. The limitations of course, is that it does not actively attempt to motivate a treatment for the loved one. I personally question this. I feel like that might differ from meeting to meeting. And then evidence for influencing the outcome of reduced use. There's limited evidence on that. So the evidence that is there is focused on supporting the loved one. There really isn't evidence there for the goal of the loved one going and reducing their own engaging in the behavior or seeking treatment. And then intervention, the strengths, it can, for the cases where treatment entry does happen, it can produce immediate results. So same day in some cases, or within 24 hours. And then also, it is a highly structured process. There isn't a lot of training that's needed to happen. The interventionist typically is going to be doing some pre-work with the family, working towards alignment, understanding a little bit more of the family constellation, the system of what's going on. And then they're going to run the show, right? So it's not as though the family members need to onboard a lot of skills, which can take time and coaching to then be able to administer, right? Limitations. As mentioned before, it can damage relationships. Some individuals experience it as coercive or shaming. Right. I know a couple of comedians who speak quite publicly about their experience in their intervention. And of course, they're comedians, so they talked about it in a funny way. However, it's like I can hear some trauma being created in those environments, perhaps. Right. Okay. And then, of course, the associated costs with intervention. That can sometimes be a prohibitive barrier for some folks. Considerations and resources. I'm going to try to be brief here so we can open up for some Q&A at the end. When considering craft, first, I need to say over and over again, a bulk of the research that is out there is related to the treatment for the identified patient being or having a substance use disorder. There is extremely limited research on the use of craft for helping families affected by gambling harm. Gambling therapists, there is so much opportunity in here. There's actually a lot of alarming things that I kind of saw, a lot of alarming things that I didn't see while I was doing some of this research. Um, Now, specific for craft to be used for gambling harms, the research was only really focused on individual facilitation and self-study. So group facilitation of craft, there's like a hole that's in there. There's nothing. And then when I talk about the limited support or the limited research that's available for craft, like a nice study that was in there that was more recent, like within the past decade. Um, it was really taking a look at like one group was individual facilitation, another group was self-study. And so some of the findings that came from there is that when it came to treatment entry, there really wasn't a significant difference between if the CSO had self-study or if they had individual facilitation. The entry rates were about the same. However, when it came to the other primary goals and objectives, it was really individual facilitation where they found significant difference in reducing the days that their loved one had gambled, reducing the dollars that they had gambled, and then improving the general functioning and well-being for the family member and improving relationships, keeping relationship communication open. So I do want to ask again if people can throw some stuff in the chat. Just thinking about other considerations when talking or working with families. what are the perceived barriers that families may present with from getting their own support? Right? I have a number of ones. And the reason why I think it's valuable to kind of think about these and consider them ahead of time is because if they present to us in the session, we want to be able to be prepared to respond to them. Right. So it's like, okay, one of the barriers that I sometimes get from family members, and again, not specific towards gambling, just across the board, I don't have the time to go to my own type of support group. I always find it so interesting. I heard this from a colleague, and I found this to be very, very true for myself. And so I've integrated it into my own work as well. Like, I can't tell you the number of families that have come and sat down in front of me and said, Paul, anything, tell me anything. I will do anything and everything I can for my loved one. Just tell me what I need to do. And I gotta tell you, the amount of families that are willing to go to their own support group, it's interesting, right? I'm willing to do anything but that. I'm always curious as to why, right? Patty, lack of support groups. Yes, that's a very, very big one. Lack of support groups that are specifically focused on this. Again, clinicians, there's opportunity for us in here. There is a service need that we do have. All right. How is sitting and complaining going to help? I get this so much. About family support groups in general, sometimes specifically about Al-Anon or Nar-Anon if a person has had some experience in some fellowships. And my usual response to that is, well, it's not supposed to be about complaining. So if that's what your experience is in that group, I'd encourage you to check out some other fellowships that are out there. But then more specific to craft, it can be helpful to kind of put in that education of, well, it's not really focused so much on complaining. It's more focused on giving you concrete, tangible skills and a little bit more insight as to what's going on for your loved one, right? So we're trying to understand more about what's going on, equip you with skills for things that you can do with your relationship with your loved one, and then planning for the future if and when they do get ready for treatment, right? And so I like to number one, give that re-education. It's not really about complaining, and then talk about what the possible gains are, right? Thank you so much, Darby. Another complaint there, or another perceived barrier. They don't believe it's their personal problem. You know what? That may be the case. It might not be your personal problem. However, if this is your loved one and you love them and you're concerned for them, even though you didn't sign up for it, it sounds like it has become your problem. You did call, right? So how do we support you? And then is it something you'd be willing to check out even once? So on and so forth. How much does this cost? If you're local here in New Jersey, thank you so much, Council on Compulsive Gambling of New Jersey. Affected family members can apply under the grant, given they meet the financial considerations for it. So that's something that I educate family members that call in all the time. If you want to get your own support, there doesn't have to be a financial barrier for it. And then generally speaking, when it comes to craft groups that are out there, they are free. These are free services, unless it's something that's hosted by like a person's therapy practice, right? Then they might have, it might be considered or termed as like a therapy group, and they might have their fee attached to it or billing insurance or whatever it is. But when you talk about like a true to form craft group that is out in the community, it is a free community service. Nobody returns my calls. Treatment access is no joke. That's a big thing that's out there just in general. I know even within New Jersey, within the network that we have provided, facilitated through the council, there's a number of resources on there. However, what do we have? 20, 30, 40 people that are serving the needs of gamblers and family members of gamblers across the entire state. Like it would make sense if people are going to fill up at a certain point. So efforts towards expanding networks, again, with craft being disseminated in group formats, you're able to access multiple people in one hour spot as opposed to an individual session. Again, there's lots of opportunity here.
Paul, not to interrupt, I just wanted you to know we have about 5 minutes remaining.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lenny. And this, I've got two slides left. All right. Resources, again, my big concern when it came to trying to find craft resources in New Jersey. This is what I found. Please, 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 my email is on the last slide or dump it in the chat. If there's any other places that you are aware of that are actively running craft groups, does not matter if it's focused on gambling, it could be focused on substance use disorders. Even if I just segue for a moment to take a look at substance use disorders, it's alarming to me that these are like, there's only two things that I can see that are like active, ongoing resources for craft in New Jersey. When you go onto the page for folks that are certified to facilitate craft training, there is one in the state of New Jersey that's completed the training from Robert J. Myers. One certified person in the state of New Jersey. That's out of this world. Professionals that are interested in going through training, I gave those links here. One is to Robert J. Myers himself. He has kind of like an at-home thing where CEs are equipped with it. And then there's ODL Education. I do not work for these companies. I'm not affiliated. I'm not getting kickbacks. This is just strictly like, hey, if you're interested, there's two places where you can go about doing this. Alexis, thank you so much. Just a pointer for anyone that might be involved in advertising for Care Plus. You can't find it on a web search. How are people going to access the service if they can't find it? Right? So, anyway, for those that are interested, I'm more than happy to share the resources that I had used. Lots of other things that were out there, just things that didn't end up becoming included as part of this presentation. So thank you so much, everybody. And I know that we're like right on the wire, but I will still hang out for questions if anybody has them.
I have a question.
Absolutely. How are you, Holly?
I am well. Happy Friday, Paul. This was great, amazing. I'm going to look into how I could learn more about the craft training. So you said something earlier. You said two things. First of all, I never heard of betrayal therapy, and I really like that. I wrote that down. The second point you made was don't focus on the outcome, but focus on the intervention. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Is that something related to craft, or you're just saying in general that therapists should just focus on like the intervention they're using with working with this population?
So it's interesting because I use this in a lot of different ways. I use this in supervision. So when talking with a therapist who's doing therapy, but then I also talk about this with clients. I also talk about this with family members, etc. So if we focus on our intervention, we're focusing on the things that we can do. Right. So, what am I in control of? I'm in control of how I'm approaching the situation, if I'm using certain skills in a situation, so on and so forth. Whereas if I'm focusing on the outcome, there may be things involved in the outcome that I might not be in control of. So for a family member in this context, right? So if I'm focusing on the intervention, how am I doing with my communication skills with my loved one? Am I using the motivational strategies that I'm learning? Or do I struggle in some of those areas? If I focus on the skills that I'm using, I'm doing what I can. If I focus on the outcome, I want them to want to go to treatment. I might not be in control of that, right? And so sometimes I try to like emphasize that with family members who are really concerned for their loved ones. But then just the same way for supervisees that I'm working with, it's like, let's again, what can we control? We can control our use of the craft. Like what model are we using with this client, so on and so forth. Like let's like really, really drill in and make sure that we're employing the best use of the skills that we can, because that's what we can control. We can't control the outcome of how that's going to land with the patient. And of course, we can be adaptive. We can flex the model that we're using depending on what we're seeing, but it's, let's focus on what we can control, the intervention, and let's not focus on what we can't control, the outcome.
Thank you for sharing that. That was really perfect because a lot of times when I work with newly licensed professional or people, getting their LPC, sometimes we can't take on if a client was to relapse or resume use. But if you talk to somebody about, hey, let's focus on an intervention versus the outcome, I think that can relieve some of that.
Yeah,
So thank you.
absolutely.
Paul, Jane has her hand up.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I have a question about reading. I've worked with a craft model mainly with substance use clients for years. I took a training, like a 30-hour training about 6 years ago. And
Mhm.
I often recommend the Getting Your Loved One Sober ... book that has, a 17-word title. Would you recommend anything different? Yes, that one. Would you recommend anything different for a gambling family member to read? Or would that book do the same for them?
So again, there's so much opportunity here because there really isn't much that's specific towards craft with gambling. My cry here is as a professional community, if we take a look at what we know about craft in the substance use population, and seeing that there's all of the rise and access, like all the proliferation that's going on with gambling, there's lots of opportunity for us to be employing something that is already evidence based and recognizing there may need to be some adaptation for a different treatment population. They're both behavioral disorders, substance use disorder and gambling disorder. They're both behavioral. So it's like, okay, there may need to be some adaptation. The literature is just very poor. It's hardly existent. And then when it comes to like finding a book, I got nothing. Sorry, James. Good question
Yeah.
though.
I have a particular family member that has her own history with Al-Anon from her child's father, who has the gambling problem that lives with her. So she tried Gamanon and it wasn't getting what she needed. So she screams craft to me. And she's willing to do the reading and the work. So I'm going to recommend the book to her and
Mhm.
kind of start our conversations that way. I just was hoping that there was something maybe a little bit more tailored.
Maybe maybe we can get on the horn with our friend Jody Bechtel and see if she wants to have a sequel to her book that came out, what was that, 5 years ago, something like that. But
Hey, Paul.
hey there,
Paul.
Paul.
Hey, how are you? Great talk. So I'm a person with lived and living experience from compulsive gambling over 30 years. My wife has uh, that amount of time active in Gam-Anon. And we do work with couples. And the last since COVID, I would say a sharp uptick in parents because in Connecticut we have every type of legalized gambling. But I just want to make a comment. You said a couple of times you used the word kid. In my experience in the last few years, that person affecting parents or loved ones is in the range of 25 to 35. Yeah, we all know teenagers uh, you know, are indulging, but in crisis mode, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing 25 to 35-year-old either living with the loved ones or not. Just an observation. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for that observation. And just a correction on my end, I am guilty of that across the board. For a bulk of my clients, I do actively refer to them as kids, even though they might clearly be over the age of 18. So yes, I'm guilty of that.
The older I get, the younger they look.
Uh,
Anyway, well, I think we're going to have to wrap it up here. But Paul, thank you so much. That was a very, very good, informative presentation, and we appreciate your efforts in putting this together. Um, our next presentation is tentatively scheduled for May 15th. And it's kind of in a rough stage right now, but it will be smoothed out and ready to go. Um, addressing the legal issues confronting therapists working with gambling clients. And it's going to be presented by a former judge who happens to be a board member of the council. So looking forward to getting that together and out to you all, and we hope to see you soon. Have a great afternoon and weekend. It's supposed to be beautiful. Enjoy the weather.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.